Welcome to Last Dawn Stories channel. My younger sister is infatuated with love. She insists on supporting a man even though she's penniless. Before the apocalypse arrived, I won $100 million in the lottery. She demanded a staggering $50 million from me. I'm your own sister. You even used my birthday as the lottery numbers. What's wrong with giving me half? When I refused, my sister and her boyfriend fed me to the zombies. When I opened my eyes again, I was reborn. My sister, with a big pregnant belly, was crying to me about not having money for the wedding. I forcibly held back the words about winning $100 million in the lottery. In this life, I'm going to stay away from love, struck foolishness, go on a shopping spree, and just relax when the apocalypse comes. Sis, I'm pregnant. Steven and I don't have money for the wedding. Can you lend me $200,000? In a dazed state, I heard the voice I hated the most, my twin sister, Linda, with a pregnant belly, looked at me with tearful almond-shaped eyes, asking for money. At this moment, Linda and I were having hot pot and chatting. The surroundings were lively, and there were no hordes of zombies tearing at me. I immediately realized that I had been reborn to the time when Linda was pregnant out of wedlock and crying poverty to borrow money from me, in my previous life, a month before the zombie crisis and the arrival of the apocalypse. I was lucky enough to win $100 million in the lottery. When Linda cried to me about being pregnant and having no money for the wedding, I was angry and sorry at the same time, so I told her about my lottery win. Unexpectedly, Linda made an outrageous demand, asking me to give her $50 million. I'm your own sister. You even used my birthday as the lottery numbers. What's wrong with giving me half? It's ridiculous. How could I possibly agree, after deducting taxes? I got $80 million from the $100 million win. Linda wanted $50 million, which was more than half of $80 million. As for the lottery numbers, since Linda and I are twins, I used my own birthday. I refused to give her $50 million. The maximum amount I was willing to give was $8 million, so Linda held a grudge. After the apocalypse broke out and she came to me, she and her boyfriend Steven tied me up and fed me to the zombies. I was eaten by the zombies. The deep-seated despair and the excruciating pain of my flesh being torn apart were etched into my mind, making me shiver all over. I vowed that if there was an afterlife, I would send this despicable couple to hell with my own hands. I picked up a few rolls of fat beef with my chopsticks. 1 second I was chatting with Linda, and the next, I was reborn. I forcibly swallowed the words that were about to come out regarding my $100 million lottery win. Suppressing the overwhelming hatred in my heart, I stared at Linda coldly. No, Linda panicked. Nina, you're my own sister. We're each other's only family. How can you not help me? Here we go again. Whenever Linda did something wrong or wanted money, she would use this kind of moral blackmail on me. Once I refused to help, she would cry, make a scene, and even threaten to commit suicide until I gave in. Linda and I are orphans. We've depended on each other for more than 20 years. We share the same blood and have the same face. I usually help her as long as her requests aren't too excessive, until Linda became completely love-struck and brought home Steven, a good-for-nothing hooligan, claiming he was her one true love and stubbornly insisting on supporting him. We had the most intense argument ever. Sister, Steven is really good to me. He's just down on his luck right now without a job. Why do you look down on him? Why won't you help me? She wanted to support a man even though she had no money of her own, and she used my money to do it, but in the end, I gave in. Although I was angry and frustrated, I had no choice because she was my only family. Who would have thought that Linda was not only infatuated with love but also an ungrateful wretch? She demanded half of $100 million, and if she didn't get it, she would bite me hard. I had helped her so much, but she only saw me as a mobile ATM. A source of nourishment for her love. It was ridiculous that I didn't see her true colors until I was on the verge of death in my previous life. Linda, I'm not your mother. I have no obligation to give you money. Besides, getting a marriage certificate is free. Putting down my chopsticks, I said coldly, my eyes filled with coldness. Linda was surprised by my attitude. Why was the usual doormat ATM acting so differently? Nina, you have such a high salary. Can't you lend me $200,000? I retorted, I earned this money through hard work. It didn't just fall from the sky. Why should I lend it to you? Linda was so used to asking for money that being refused so sharply by me for the first time made her lose face. She said angrily, $20,000 is more important than your own sister. Nina, don't be so heartless. If a sister won't even help with this, it would be better not to have a sister like you. See? This is an ungrateful person. She takes others' efforts for granted. Once that person stops giving, she turns on them faster than turning a page. I sneered dismissively. I'd rather not have a sister like you, Linda. I won't be your and Steven's cash machine anymore. You two are bottomless pits, insatiably greedy and terrifying. Since you started dating Steven, you've borrowed $50,000 from me. Consider that money burned for the dead. Under Linda's shocked and angry gaze, I calmly stood up. From now on, we'll go our separate ways. I'm no longer your sister, and you're no longer my sister. Nina, you heartless miser, you with your own sister just because I asked for some money. Don't come crying and begging for my forgiveness when my boyfriend makes it big. Linda shouted at my back. Ignoring Linda's crazy yelling and the curious stares of passers-by, I turned around and left with a swagger. It's ridiculous. $100 million is still waiting for me, and the apocalypse is coming. There's a lot to do. I'm going on a shopping spree, build a safe house, and try to just relax when the apocalypse arrives. Who would pay attention to Linda, this frustrated clown? I promised to donate $200,000 to the lottery center, and the money arrived in their account on the same day. Looking at the string of zeros after the number 1 in my bank card, I suddenly felt a great sense of security. Money gives people confidence, self-assurance, happiness, and joy. This is the charm of money. Sisters, lovers, friends, anyone can betray you, but money won't. I'm quitting my job. With a snap, I did the thing I've wanted to do most in my life. I quit my job. Nina, what the hell is wrong with you? Go back and finish writing the proposal. My bald-headed boss pointed at my nose and cursed. He couldn't believe I was quitting, although the company exploited me every day, made me work overtime without pay, and always played the compensatory leave trick. I was an orphan with no one to rely on. In the current tough job market, losing this high-paying job would be like a fish out of water for me, but he didn't know that losing this job now was like a fish losing a bicycle or a bird losing a swim ring. It didn't matter at all. With a look of 3 parts coldness, 3 parts sarcasm, and 6 parts disdain, I threw my resignation letter in his face. I'd rather go back to the countryside to farm and retire than work myself to death here. After saying that, under the cursing, angry, envious, and jealous gazes of my boss and colleagues, I left the company wearing my high-heel shoes with a click-clack sound. Goodbye. After claiming the lottery prize and resigning, there were still 29 days until the zombie outbreak. This crisis was extremely fierce, and countless people would die. However, it wasn't that the heavens didn't give humanity a chance. In my previous life, some people awakened special abilities in advance and sensed something was wrong. However, governments around the world tried their best to suppress the news for fear of causing panic, so people had no idea that a great disaster was awaiting them. I awakened the ability of a replication space. This is an extremely powerful ability. Items inside the replication space can not only be kept fresh and at a constant temperature forever but can also be replicated infinitely. For example, if I put a bottle of iced cola into the replication space, I will have an endless supply of iced cola from then on. Therefore, I don't need to stockpile a large amount of supplies. I just need to buy a little of each item. Money, jewelry, and other valuables are the least valuable things during the apocalypse. I want to make the most of this $100 million before the apocalypse arrives. The most important supplies in the apocalypse are food, rice, flour, cooking oil, soy sauce, vinegar, tea, and seasonings are essential. I'll get a box of instant noodles of every flavor, a series of self-heating hot pots, and other instant foods. Snacks like potato chips and boneless chicken feet are all added to the shopping cart. After the basic food is stocked up, high-end ingredients are also necessary. I love meat, so I'll buy premium streaky pork, A5 Wagyu beef, Australian lobsters, and deep-sea caviar. These meats that I could only occasionally afford before can now be bought without restraint. I'll also get a little of each kind of vegetable and fruit, from supermarkets, 5-star restaurants, dessert shops, and milk tea shops to wet markets and night-market food stalls, from expensive top-grade foie gras to cheap flour, raw and cooked, cold and hot, sweet and spicy, sour and ordinary. As long as I can name it and eat it, I'll buy it all. After all these purchases, my food reserves are already very abundant. Daily necessities and medicines, such as toothbrushes, toothpaste, facial tissues, sanitary napkins, cold medicine, and antibiotics, are also not left out. After stocking up on all the basic goods, there are still more than $90 million left. I can't spend it all. I really can't. To avoid wasting this money, I started buying clothes, bags, cars, jewelry, buying whatever is expensive, going to bars, clubbing, and enjoying eating, drinking, and having fun. I'm enjoying myself to the fullest before the apocalypse. However, even with all my crazy spending, there are still $70 million left in the end. I'm worried, I still haven't spent it all. This is probably the trouble of being rich, having too much money to spend. I want to be rich in my next life too. There are more and more reports of people biting each other. Many patients who go crazy and bite others have been admitted to the hospital. Most people have realized that something is wrong and have started stockpiling supplies, leaving the luxury goods store and coming down the escalator. I was carrying bags of clothes of all sizes. Looking up, the supermarket on the second floor was packed with people, and the checkout line even extended to the first floor. The crowd looked worried, anxious, and restless, in such an anxious atmosphere. Conflicts could easily break out. People started fighting because of queue jumping, the crowd was in chaos, and some people even took the opportunity to skip paying. I quickened my pace downstairs. "Sister, is that you?" A familiar voice sounded behind me. My heart tightened, but I didn't stop walking. My arm was grabbed tightly. "Why didn't you stop when I called you, sis? Are you avoiding me? Do you know how hard my life has been, and you still have the mood to go shopping?" Bombarded with a series of questions, Linda forcibly held me back. Through my sunglasses, I could see Linda staring at me angrily. 1,000 thoughts rushed through my mind. Tonight was my last chance to enjoy myself before the apocalypse. I thought everything was going smoothly, but I just had to run into Linda on my way back. Linda's belly was getting bigger. She was also carrying big and small bags filled with heavy fruits and vegetables. Beads of sweat rolled down her face. It had only been a month since we last met, and Linda had lost her former radiance. Her face, which was identical to mine, was now unkempt, and she looked extremely tired. Her boyfriend wasn't there to carry things while his girlfriend was pregnant, without my help. Linda's so-called true love was just like that. I didn't feel any pity for her. In my previous life, this dear sister of mine tied me up and fed me to the zombies with her own hands. I had cried all my tears and my heart had turned cold. All I felt for her now was endless hatred and a sense of the futility of my past efforts. Linda and I are identical twins. We can recognize each other even by just a back view. Linda reached out to take off my sunglasses. I broke free and sidestepped to avoid her. "Who are you, Scram?" I growled in a rough, neutral-sounding voice. Linda was stunned for a few seconds. Sorry, your back looks so much like my sister's. I mistook you for her. Be more careful next time." To avoid being recognized by acquaintances, I made full preparations. I wore sunglasses, a mask, and a hat, wrapped myself up tightly, and even temporarily changed my voice with medicine. However, Linda still had some doubts. She followed me closely. I wasn't worried at all. The stun gun in my car wasn't for show. It could easily take down an adult. Wait. The moment I opened the car door, Linda suddenly rushed up. She was extremely excited. "Sister, I knew it was you." The telepathy between twins is really powerful. She could still recognize me even with all my disguises, but it's also possible that Linda was bluffing me. I frowned unhappily. "Who's your sister? I won't be polite if you keep harassing me." I threw all my things onto the passenger seat and quietly picked up the stun gun. Linda still didn't give up. "Take off your mask and sunglasses, prove that you're not my sister, and I'll let you go." She held me tightly with both hands, as if I were her prey, afraid that I would run away. Just then, a man in the crowd held up his phone and shouted that the zombie outbreak had started. The apocalypse had arrived. All the supplies in the city's supermarkets had been bought out, and he urged everyone to hurry and grab whatever they could. The people who had come to the street to buy things and those who had returned empty-handed from the supermarket were panicked when they heard there were no supplies left, so the crowd rioted and started snatching things from those carrying shopping bags. I was caught off guard by this sudden turn of events. Looking at Linda, who was still holding onto me tightly, slap, I gave her a resounding slap across the face. Linda instinctively let go, and I took the opportunity to turn the stun gun to its maximum and shock her in the chest. She let out a cry of surprise from the slap, and before she could finish, she was electrocuted. She staggered, twitched a few times, and then fell to the ground, unconscious. Looking coldly at Linda lying on the ground, I felt extremely satisfied. In my previous life, Linda and her boyfriend tied me up and fed me to the zombies. She even clapped her hands and said I deserved it. My heart was filled with despair, and I wished I could turn into a vengeful ghost on the spot. After that, I no longer had any affection for this sister. This was a commercial street with a lot of people and vehicles. Linda was lying right in the middle of the road. There was a chance that a car might run her over if the driver wasn't careful. More and more people were rioting, and those who couldn't buy things started snatching and smashing cars. Although I really wanted to take revenge on the spot, the situation wasn't right, and I didn't want to take risks. Closing the car door, I drove away. The zombie crisis broke out a week earlier than in my previous life. Unlike in novels and movies, these zombies are swift, have tough skin that is impervious to blades and bullets, are extremely irritable, and bite anyone they see. They are like mutated humans with rabies. Some zombies retain a certain level of intelligence from their previous lives. They can open doors, climb walls, and know how to avoid attacks, making them very difficult to eliminate. What's more troublesome is that in addition to biting people and causing them to mutate, their blood can also infect people if it splashes onto the skin. In my previous life, humans didn't realize that they could be infected just by getting zombie blood on their skin. They thought as long as the wounds avoided zombie blood, they would be safe. So they didn't take any protective measures when killing zombies. This wrong understanding led to a large number of people being infected and mutated. In the safe house, I logged onto a social media platform, and it was filled with videos of zombies biting people. The situation on foreign websites was even worse. Some small countries had already fallen. In one of the most popular videos, zombies swarmed out, and unarmed people fled in panic. The military was forced to focus on defense. I posted multiple comments in different comment sections, warning people to be careful of zombie blood as even skin contact could lead to infection. After that, I tossed my phone aside, lay comfortably on the soft sofa, sipped iced cola, and ate a KFC family bucket. The golden, brown drumsticks were crispy when bitten into, filling my mouth with the aroma of meat. Then I chose a movie to watch while eating, enjoying the fruits of my preparations and lying back leisurely. At this moment, I felt that all the hard work of the past month were worth it. Buzz buzz, an unknown call interrupted this beautiful moment of comfort. Nina, I'm at your door now, open the door for me. Linda's acrid and venomous voice came through, and I frowned, having a bad feeling. I turned on the villa's surveillance monitor, and it showed a tall, thin woman standing outside the iron gate, making a phone call. It was Linda, in my previous life, although we had a huge argument over $100 million. When the apocalypse came, I still let Linda and Steven move into the newly bought villa in the suburbs. At that time, I didn't expect that Linda would still hold a grudge about me not giving her the money and would be so crazy as to feed me to the zombies. But in this life, I severed ties with Linda in advance. I didn't tell her the address of the villa. How did she find it? Could it be that she was reborn too? Linda's next words confirmed my suspicion. Nina, I was reborn. After you stunned me on the roadside, someone hit me with their car and I died. I lost my life, and the baby was gone too. Hearing this, I burst into laughter. It's truly justice at work. Evil deeds will be punished. I had originally formulated a detailed and meticulous plan to take revenge on these two scumbags, but the plan couldn't keep up with the changes. It was beyond my expectations that the evil doer didn't die and came back to life. It seemed I had to come up with a new plan. Linda, since you know the address of my villa, it means it's not the you from this life who was reborn, but the you from the previous life. Recalling the scene of being bitten by zombies, I said viciously, you and Steven fed me to the zombies. How dare you come to me? Linda's tone was complex. Sis, I'm sorry, I was just impulsive. Please forgive me. I gave a cold snort and remained silent. Then she changed the subject. But that was all in the previous life. I fed you to the zombies, and you stunned me, which led to me being run over by a car and losing both my life and the babies. We're even now. I was so angry that I laughed. What do you mean we're even? Can a blood feud be settled just because you say so? Linda became furious. What else do you want? She threatened me maliciously. I'm telling you, Nina, if you don't open the door for me, I'll post online and tell everyone that you won $100 million and hoarded a lot of supplies. I'll make them come and grab your stuff. Sister, guess how many people will come to rob you? You don't want to be eaten by zombies like in the previous life, do you? So open the door and let me in right away. I was so angry at Linda's vicious words that my vision went black. It really feels like I committed some great sin in my previous life, and this life is my punishment for having Linda as my sister. Pressing my throbbing temple, after a moment of thought, I pretended to be helpless and said, fine, I'll open the door and let you in later. Did you come alone? Isn't Steven with you? Linda spat in disgust. don't mention that bastard. Linda said that after I died in the previous life, she and Steven went out to search for supplies. They encountered an intermediate-level zombie, and Steven, being a coward, pushed her out to distract the zombie, resulting in her also being eaten by the zombie. It's ridiculous. She tied up her own sister and fed her to the zombies, and then her boyfriend did the same to her. Wasn't it supposed to be true love? Weren't they going to support each other for a lifetime? The love sustained with my money turned out to be extremely fragile in the face of disaster and human nature. Linda, you want to take revenge on Steven too, right? I was certain that. Given Linda's fickle and heartless nature, she hated Steven even more than I did. Of course, I want him to suffer. Even through the phone, I could clearly hear Linda grinding her teeth, as if she were gnawing on bones and flesh. As long as you bring Steven here, I'll still consider you my sister, and we can share the supplies. The condition I offered was exactly what Linda wanted, and she readily agreed. Sister, you're the best. I was wrong before, it's all that bastard Steven's fault. Without him, we sisters wouldn't have turned against each other. Don't worry, I'll definitely bring him here. With a triumphant smile on my lips, I said, good, I'm looking forward to it. The comments I posted online went viral. Many people didn't believe that skin contact with zombie blood could cause infection and sent me private messages scolding me for spreading rumors, but most people were rational and cherished their lives, taking the attitude of, it's better to believe it than not. They called on everyone to take full protective measures when killing zombies and avoid getting zombie blood on their skin. I let out a long sigh of relief. I don't want to be a savior, I just want to stay in the safe house and get through the apocalypse comfortably. However, I still felt a bit uneasy. By providing such important information, I had also contributed to the fight against zombies. A few days later, 2 people came to the villa. Steven looked at Linda obsequiously, bending over to massage her back and shoulders. Linda was extremely proud and loudly threatened that if I dared not accept them, she would call on others to besiege me. Then she waved her phone in front of the surveillance camera, the threat clear. Steven praised Linda, calling her smart and beautiful. They looked like a pair of arrogant lackeys relying on the power of others. Sister, open the door, Linda said, standing with her hands on her hips and looking up at the surveillance camera as if she had everything under control. Beep. I pressed the door opening button, and the heavy iron gate slowly opened. The 2 of them couldn't wait to rush into the villa. This villa was built in a wealthy area on the outskirts of the city, and there were many neighbors around. In my previous life, the son of a wealthy merchant was infected with the zombie virus early on. His family couldn't bear to see him killed as a zombie, so they kept him at home. In the end, this young master mutated into an intelligent zombie and went from door to door in the wealthy area, biting everyone. In my previous life, Linda and Steven accidentally discovered the young master and his zombie minions. They lured them with pork soaked in human blood to come and eat me. This life, they were in the same villa I bought. When they entered the villa, the living room was empty, showing no signs of anyone living there. This was different from the previous life, where were the LCD TV, the leather sofa, the rotating dining table, and the upright refrigerator filled with delicious food. Linda and Steven rushed into the hall in disbelief, looking around, but there was nothing. Nina, how dare you play tricks on me? Linda gritted her teeth, waving her fists and shouting, I know you can hear me, come out. Steven also put on an act. He held up his phone and shouted at the top of his lungs, Nina, I'm warning you, your behavior has angered us. If you don't come out, I'll post a video and tell everyone that you won $100 million, then people will come after you, and no matter where you hide, they'll find you. Linda and Steven's every move was being transmitted to me in real time through the surveillance camera. The way they jumped around in anger was truly laughable. Linda called me, where are you, Nina? Why is there no furniture in the villa? Where's the TV? Where's the food? I'm starving to death. Do you know that? Didn't you promise me? I was bombarded with a series of questions. What did I promise you? I don't remember, I said casually. My indifferent attitude made Linda even angrier. She said coldly, aren't you afraid that I'll tell everyone that you won $100 million and hoarded supplies? You must have stockpiled a lot of things after being reborn, right? I remember you're a space ability user. Someone like you, a mobile supply storage, is a prime target. Steven played the good cop role. Nina, we're doing this for your own good. With so many supplies, it's dangerous for you to live alone. It would be better if we 3 lived together and could look out for each other. I rolled my eyes. The biggest danger was you two. Seeing Linda's face turn red with anger, about to explode, I slowly said, just kidding, I'm in the villa's basement. Go to the northwest corner, there's a switch to the basement passage there. With a laugh, Linda took the lead, and Stephen followed closely behind. There was a raised part on a white wall in the northwest corner. Behind it was a library, a large space that could accommodate over 100 people. As the wall rotated, a foul stench wafted out from the dimly lit space. Linda and Stephen covered their noses in disgust. Nina, why would you choose this place? They said as they went in. I smiled. Because there are zombies inside. As soon as the words left my mouth, low growls were heard, then there were ear-piercing screams. Ah, there are zombies, run. More than 50 zombies chased after the two of them in a swarm, their mouths wide open like beasts starved for a long time. Linda's face twisted in fear. You bitch, Nina, you went back on your word. You're despicable and shameless, filthy. I laughed heartily. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. You deserve this, Linda. Do you like the gift I prepared for you? Stephen cursed, insulting my entire family. The two of them ran towards the door, but it had closed at some point, so they had no choice but to run to the second-floor room. Too angry to think rationally after being tricked, Linda took out her phone, logged into her social media account, and was about to expose that I won $100 million. You're done for, Nina. Soon everyone will know that you won $100 million and hoarded supplies. Just wait to be besieged. Stephen stopped her. Don't be impulsive. Once we reveal that Nina won $100 million and hoarded supplies, a lot of people will come to fight us for it, and will regret it. The zombies banged on the door, and the heavy wooden door shook violently. Linda slapped Stephen across the face. Then punched and kicked him. Shut up, Nina is hiding and now she's sent zombies after us. Do you still expect her to help us, idiot? With a hard slap, Stephen's face had several red scratches, his eyes flashed with malice, and he kicked her. Bitch, you brought me here to be chased by zombies. I haven't settled the score with you yet, and now you're lecturing me, sitting in the monitoring room, eating spicy potato chips and watching the two of them turn on each other. I felt extremely satisfied. I wasn't afraid of Linda's threats at all. My safe house wasn't in that villa but in an underground bomb shelter far from the city. I died in that villa in my previous life. How could I live in the place where I died again? Instead, I was looking forward to Linda posting the wrong address and attracting vicious people. I wanted to see how they would deal with the situation. Linda's body was weak after the miscarriage. After being kicked, she doubled over in pain, and blood flowed from between her legs. She looked at Stephen resentfully. Stephen calmed down a bit and stammered an apology. I'm sorry, Before he could finish, Linda suddenly pounced on him, burying her head in his neck. Stephen howled and kicked Linda away, covering his bleeding neck. But no matter how he covered it, the blood gushed out like a fountain and wouldn't stop. It seemed Linda had bitten his artery. Ah, you bitch. Stephen staggered forward, grabbed Linda by the hair, dragged her to the wall, and smashed her head against it again and again. Linda struggled desperately. Since Stephen was more severely injured, neither of them got the upper hand. The once loving couple had now turned against each other and were fighting to the death. If this continued, one of them would surely be killed first. That wouldn't be fun. I'd seen enough of the show. Now it was time for them to enjoy the last gift I prepared for them. Boom, boom, boom. Explosions sounded at the door of the room. Wood chips flew everywhere. The wall collapsed, and the door was blown to pieces. The two people who were fighting were stunned. Before they could react, the horde of zombies rushed in. Roar. The zombie young master moved the fastest. Just as he was about to bite Linda, she came to her senses and pushed Stephen forward to block the bite. Stephen was bitten on the neck again. Zombie teeth were much sharper than human teeth. His eyes widened, and his body twitched. He was like a skinny chicken with its neck slit, powerless to resist. Linda got up and tried to jump out the window, but before she could reach it, a zombie woman jumped out and pounced on her. Then one after another, more zombies jumped on her. The zombies surrounded them and started biting frantically. The phone call was still connected, and the sound of chewing came through. Linda and Stephen's figures were engulfed by the dense swarm of zombies, and the bloody scene was obscured. Blood splattered onto the ceiling, and the room was filled with screams and growls, like an execution. Ah, you bitch, Nina, I won't let you go even if I become a ghost. Nina, fuck you, % you and hashtag. They cursed me, saying I wouldn't die a good death and that I'd go to hell. But who was it that tied me up and fed me to the zombies, saying I deserved it and clapping at my death? Who really deserves to go to hell? I was just getting revenge for myself. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. I picked up the phone and cursed back. I cursed until my eyes were red. my throat was hoarse, and my mouth was dry, but I didn't stop. I used the most vulgar words I knew to vent the emotions that had been pent up for so long. Gradually, their curses grew quieter, and the growls of the zombies grew louder. I stopped arguing. Stop biting. This was the last human-sounding sentence from the phone. And the voice was so distorted that it was impossible to tell if it was a man or a woman. Looking at the surveillance screen, the zombie young master suddenly turned his head. His mouth was wide open, and inside was a mass of white, mushy substance. Facing such a bloody and terrifying scene, I was so scared that I dropped the phone. Linda and Steven were dead, just like me in the previous life. They were brutally killed by the zombies, surrounded and torn apart in utter despair. Not a single bone was left. I don't know how much time passed. It got dark, and the zombies gradually dispersed. Only a few were still licking the blood on the floor. I had avenged my hatred, but instead of feeling the expected joy and satisfaction, I felt a sense of melancholy and disorientation. I closed the surveillance screen and composed myself. I got up and left the monitoring room. It was dinner time. Tonight, I would have my favorite beef roll rice bowl. From now on, I would live every day with strength. The first story ends. Then the second story. I received a storm warning just like any other day, nothing out of the ordinary. At first, nobody paid attention to this disaster. We had become numb to the growing frequency of disasters since the nuclear waste was first discharged into the ocean. It wasn't until the torrential rain hit that the full horror unfolded before my eyes. My boyfriend was devoured by a swarm of fish right in front of me. The colorless rain corroded crops, fields, and human brains while a global heatwave swept across, and oxygen levels dropped. The earth had begun to cleanse itself, and us. How are we to survive? It rains every single day. Ever since they dumped that nuclear wastewater into the sea, there hasn't been a day without rain. It's so annoying. If this torrential rain is Earth's way of cleansing itself, I guess I can accept that. On my way home, pedestrians in protective suits hurried by. A mother, in panic, screamed as she pulled her child, who playfully stripped off his clothes to play in the rain. Rushing back home, nobody dared to stay out in the rain. I paused at an intersection waiting for the traffic light, turning off the storm alert notification on my phone that had turned red. Looking at the desolate streets, I finally understood the indescribable emotion I had been feeling. 1 year after the nuclear wastewater was dumped into the sea, under the gray sky, next to the dark, polluted riverbank, I had just finished burying the last of the river dolphins I had tried to save. My eyes were sore, but no tears came out. It wasn't that I couldn't cry, but that I had grown used to it. My feelings had been numbed. I had become accustomed to seeing strange bite marks on the dolphins, accustomed to the endless rain even though it was already the summer solstice. The storm warnings came one after another, despite repeated optimizations of the drainage system. Water still pooled around our ankles on the streets. I sighed, overwhelmed with annoyance. Instead of going straight home when the green light came on, I turned left and headed to the city's largest supermarket. The rain had been pouring for half a month. If nothing unusual happened, I planned to hole up at home and temporarily escape this difficult world. I rushed into the supermarket, heading straight for the pharmacy to buy a bunch of protective suits and daily medications. Passing by the oxygen tanks, I remembered my boyfriend and grabbed a few. Then, I headed to the food section to buy some canned goods, bread, frozen food, and other daily staples. Finally, in the household goods section, I picked up a few large packs of paper and a few boxes of mineral water. Its price had already risen from $2 to $4. The trunk of my car was packed full. When I came out, the rain seemed to have grown heavier, pattering violently against the car windows as if it wanted to break through and hit me directly. My heart uncontrollably started to race. Today's rain seemed unusually heavy. As I entered the parking lot, the mist from the water almost made me crash into a pillar. Jim hugged me and patted my head. After I came to my senses, I urged him to help carry the stuff up to our apartment. We live on the 16th floor. Not too high, but the elevator has been much slower since the nuclear incident. By the time we brought up the last of the medicine, the rain seemed even heavier. Water streamed down the walls from the ceiling to our shins. We rolled up our trousers and hurried inside. The water level kept rising. By the time we reached the elevator, it was up to mid-thigh. Suddenly, I felt a sharp bite on my calf, the urgency masking the pain. The water's too deep. The security guard said the elevator can't be used. Jim pointed to the emergency staircase. I sighed. 16 floors. At least it's not 32. Let's climb. Jim looked at the water, now almost reaching my thighs, and suggested I put the stuff on the table while he crouched down for me to climb on. I kissed his cheek, then waited in the stairwell with the medicine as his first cargo. The spot on my calf where I had been bitten felt itchy. I looked down and saw a familiar row of bite marks, similar to those I had seen on the dolphin corpses. Before I could think deeper, I suddenly heard Jim shouting, "Run, run, run from what?" I looked towards the door. A monstrous fish with fierce teeth, these creatures used to appear on our dinner tables. From the rain, a deformed body leaped out, its mouth wide open revealing sharp teeth, grinning as it pounced towards Jim, an octopus with 32 legs tightly coiled around his neck. I clenched my teeth to overcome my fear. Medication scattered all over the ground. I staggered to open the fire cabinet and grabbed a fire extinguisher, hurling it at the school of fish nearby. Then I threw out a safety rope. "Jim, catch, reach out and grab it, hurry, hurry." I choked out the words, a feeling of suffocation overwhelming me as Jim managed to fend off the octopus with the fire extinguisher and grabbed the rope to move toward me. The water rose deeper. The fish swarmed towards us, their sharp teeth glinting menacingly under the dim light, making it hard to see how Jim was doing. All I could do was grab Jim's hand, not bothering to pick up things from the ground, and turn to run upstairs. "Bella," Jim suddenly called out to me. I turned back. He seemed to be saying something. Before I could hear him clearly, Jim forcefully threw something at me, and flesh began to fall off his body. A giant two-headed fish opened its mouth. It devoured Jim whole, then it lunged at me. From its gaping mouth, I could almost feel the warmth of Jim's blood that hadn't yet dispersed. Scalding tears burned my eyes, an indescribable sourness hit my nose, and I widened my eyes and grabbed the fire axe. With each chop, I took a step. The foul, dark blood splattered on my face. I gritted my teeth, pushing through with my nearly collapsing legs, enduring the pain of my skin corroding, desperately running forward, until I ran out of the rain, into my house, collapsing on the carpet. My right hand still tightly clutching the axe, my left hand held 2 oxygen bottles I had grabbed in the chaos. I remembered Jim had moved to this city for me, and recalled his severe altitude sickness. Sadness and fear swept through my body, the room filled with my hurried breathing. "Jim," no one responded anymore. I lay rigid, my skin extensively necrotized from the nuclear-contaminated water and blood. In theory, I should get up, take some anti-radiation medicine, take a bath, and then lie down in bed to sleep well, but I didn't want to move. The screams mingled with the rain, and the pain numbed my nerves. I really felt like dying, but I couldn't. I answered the phone after my parents called several times, listened to them confirm our safety and ramble for about 10 minutes, then called Jim's parents to urge them not to go outside. When the call ended, they said, "Bella, take good care of yourself out there with Jim. Don't be afraid of danger, let Jim protect you." Suddenly, a loud thunderclap outside startled me, making me shudder. Holding the phone with the screen off, I looked out the window as the torrential rain furiously beat against it. Self-cleaning, this term I had seen in online comments spontaneously popped into my mind. Outside, the clouds and rain were as tumultuous as a swirling vortex in a running washing machine. The next day, the rain was still intense, but the only good news was that under the government's strict control, the number of people killed by the fish began to gradually decrease. However, due to the high number of casualties and a shortage of manpower, the city issued a call for volunteers from each community to help clear the fish. There was a long debate in the homeowners group chat, but eventually 5 people came out, and I was one of the 3 who volunteered, wearing protective gear and carrying a spear home from downstairs. I happened to run into Sherry from the community property management, who was helping a homeowner on the first floor move furniture and items. She saw me, her gaze falling on my hands, and she smiled at me. "Thank you for your hard work. Since you're here, if there are shortages of food or water, just report it in the group chat. After we finish tallying, we will purchase and deliver the items to you as soon as possible." I nodded and thanked her, then turned to enter the stairwell. As I began to climb the stairs, Sherry suddenly called out to me. She looked somewhat troubled. "The thing is, although our complex isn't located in a particularly low-lying area, it can't withstand the increasingly heavy rainfalls. As you saw earlier, the first floor has already experienced some flooding. I wanted to ask if you would be willing to let the residents from the first floor temporarily stay with you." Through the foggy protective suit, I could see the hope in her eyes. Perhaps because I had volunteered, Sherry thought of me as someone with a kind heart. I refused flatly. "Sorry, I'm not willing. I wanted to do something to alleviate my own sense of helplessness, but I wasn't foolish. Allowing strangers into my home under these extreme circumstances would be like putting myself on the fire. There are empty apartments on the top floor." The 32nd floor, climbing up there feels pretty much the same as to my 16th floor. It's a good way to pass the time and keep fit. Without waiting for Sherry's reaction, I climbed a few more steps. When I reached the 10th floor, a sudden dizziness forced me to lean on the handrail to finish my ascent. Once home, I popped a candy, took a shower, nestled on the sofa, and called both sets of parents to find out how things were on their end. I then checked my phone for flood warnings and past flight tickets. I still hadn't dared to tell them the news that Jim had died. In such a time, the longer I could keep it from them, the less they had to worry about. I wiped the corner of my eyes, then got up to take inventory of what I had. There was plenty of frozen food, instant noodles, canned goods, and several boxes of bottled water in the fridge and freezer. The only thing missing was medicine, particularly anti-radiation drugs. I compiled a list and posted it in the residents' group chat. The chat was flooded with messages. Besides listing needed supplies, many shared tips on flood prevention and survival guidelines, constantly comforting and encouraging each other. In times of disaster, we seek a sense of security through communication with our peers. Then someone shared a message in the group: radiation levels in the rain are rising rapidly. Crops harvested have absorbed high levels of radioactive isotopes. The chat eerily fell silent. No one spoke further. As panic spread throughout the building, a single thought crossed everyone's minds: if there's a problem with the food supply, how are we going to survive? I stared at the rising waterline outside the window and moved the table and sofa to block the door. The supplies promised by the property management hadn't arrived for the next 2 days. My door started to be knocked on at night, after the first floor was completely flooded. My door would be pounded 4 times every day. When I was startled awake in the middle of the night, it seemed like the chandelier above me was shaking violently. Were the people outside knocking that hard? I rubbed my eyes, only to realize that my bed was also starting to shake. An earthquake. In a panic, I quickly put on a protective suit, grabbed some water and canned goods, and rushed into the bathroom inside my bedroom, clutching the toilet tightly. How could a rainstorm cause an earthquake? Such a thing had never happened before, but the continuous heavy rain and intense shaking left me no time to think. Caught off guard, bang, my breath hitched as I watched a building opposite start to collapse from the 3rd floor up, exposing steel rebar swarming with fish, countless people tumbling into the water. Trembling, I crawled to the window, using the moonlight to watch the increasingly tilting building across the way. People desperately ran in the opposite direction, but to no avail. They were mercilessly dumped into the water like trash. Some stood on balconies, screaming as they threw their children to firefighters on boats, then were cleanly devoured by leaping fish. The building leaned more and more, until it completely collapsed into the water. Cries and screams layered one upon another, chilling to the bone. I felt as if I were in that building, the sensation of being drowned enveloping my entire body. It wasn't an illusion. Our building, too. The building also began to tilt to the right. A muffled thud came from the ceiling, lime fell onto my face, and shards of debris crashed onto the glass with a crisp sound. I wasn't sure if our building would collapse like the one opposite. The crackling sound of breaking and the roaring water made my scalp tingle. Unable to think about grabbing any supplies, I felt my blood rush to my head as I tightly grasped the walls to prevent myself from sliding in the direction of the building's tilt. Objects that were once used to block the door slid past me, striking my legs painfully. Run, head to the upper floors. What do we do if we run up? The rain has damaged the ceiling. We can't stay in the radioactive rain. The chaotic footsteps outside the door stopped abruptly, followed by someone's desperate scream. Not running meant death, but staying in the rain on the upper floors was a living death. I gripped the wall forcefully, straightening my body and squatting slightly while clenching my teeth. I took advantage of the few seconds when the building's tilt paused and dashed towards the door. Almost there, just one more step and I could open the door to run upstairs. It's better to cling to a miserable life than to die. I wanted to live. Click, a large chunk of debris from the ceiling fell in front of me. I stumbled and chipped a tooth, and before I could react, the building tilted sharply again. I was slammed harshly against the wall. Through the window and the churning flood, I could vaguely see the sunny horizon. Dawn had broken. Something pierced through the clouds into my eyes. The rain had stopped. The raging storm from a second ago had ceased unexpectedly. Even a faint sunlight began to filter through the clouds. I couldn't believe it. The sun, which hadn't appeared since the nuclear incident a year ago, emerged after the storm. The rain has stopped. It stopped. People in our building cheered, joy spreading throughout. People in the neighboring building simply stared up at the sky, their crying growing louder. I leaned against the wall, trying to stand, and found the building, though tilted, was relatively stable. I walked to the window and wiped the condensation from the glass. The 3-story deep floodwaters carried countless trees, corpses, fish, and buildings in its relentless flow. But I was still alive. I took a deep breath, wiped the sweat off my forehead, and couldn't suppress the excitement bubbling within as I burst into laughter. I had survived. I even saw the sun. Was this apocalyptic day finally coming to an end? Was the world about to return to normal? Holding a photo of Jim, I opened the window and scooped a beam of sunlight with my hand. At that moment, I finally understood what Jim was trying to tell me that day. He said, "Bella, survive." I carried the lives of 2 people. I had to survive. 5 days after the heavy rain, the mutated fish were eradicated, the city's drainage system was restored, and with the emerging sun and rising temperatures, walking along the dry roadside with my packed supplies, I felt a strange sense of familiarity. Since the nuclear wastewater was discharged into the sea, it had been a long time since I had seen such a beautiful city under the sun. I wiped the sweat from my forehead and turned to go to the property office to hand over. I bought a 2:30 p.m. flight ticket back to my hometown, planning to offer my house for the use of injured firefighters to relieve the pressure on hospitals. While exchanging thanks with the firefighters, I felt a gaze on me. After turning my head 3 times, I finally met his eyes. "George," I called out his name excitedly. Nothing was better than finding out someone you knew was still alive after a disaster. He nodded at me. I glanced around once more and gave a wry smile. "Jim's gone." He looked at me, a hint of bewilderment in his eyes, and patted my shoulder before his gaze landed on the luggage beside me. "I'll give you a ride. It's been hard to catch a taxi these days." I hesitated for a moment, checked the time, shoved my luggage into his trunk, and climbed into the back seat. I pulled out a piece of paper from my bag to wipe the sweat off my skin. George opened the driver's side door, inserted the key, started the car, and immediately turned the air conditioning up to full blast. Once he noticed I stopped wiping the sweat away, he adjusted the air conditioning back to a normal setting. "You still can't handle the heat," he remarked. "Yeah, but after a year of constant rain, a bit of heat feels quite nice," I replied. The sunlight pierced through the rising black mist, carrying bright red pinpoints that dappled the ground. Chatting sporadically with George helped ease the tension I felt significantly. We were just 5 minutes from the airport, at a red light. Seeing me still overwhelmed by the heat, George turned the air conditioning up to the maximum again and wiped off his own sweat. It was unbearably hot. The temperature seemed to climb by 1 degree Celsius every minute. I checked my phone and my eyes widened in shock, stiffly calling out to George, 54 degrees. Before he could respond, a loud explosion made our car shudder. We both looked up towards the source of the black smoke. It was the airport. A plane, just as it had taken off into the sun, was blown apart and fell like a meteor. Another loud blast. George swerved sharply. Debris sheared off half of our car roof, narrowly missing our necks. The airport was engulfed in thick smoke, the air even hotter now. I bit my lip and without a second thought, urged him, "Let's go home." We had to get home. The high temperature chased relentlessly behind our car, soaring as if it wanted to incinerate us. By the time we rushed back to our neighborhood, the temperature had spiked to 58 degrees. Perhaps the high heat had thinned the air. Just getting out of the car and walking to the stairwell left me gasping for breath, and even George was panting, leaning on his knees. I desperately wanted to rest for just a second, but the intense heat seemed to char us, the hot air clinging to our skin through the shattered windows, not minding the scorching ground. I crawled up using my hands and feet, George helping me up the last flight of stairs. Our front door was still securely locked. The injured firefighters hadn't been moved from the hospital yet. My hands were blistered from the burn, and since I couldn't enter the passcode, I tugged at George's sleeve. The code, 01265534. As the door swung open, I practically rolled inside. George, with his longer strides, reached the air conditioner before me and turned it on. When the cool air hit us, we both sighed in relief, but it quickly became hot again. Remembering the frozen goods in the fridge, I called George to help me take some out and put them in a basin. Finally feeling somewhat cooler, coming home was the right choice, although the temperature outside had stopped rising at 58 degrees. If we had tried to escape elsewhere, merely relying on air conditioning to fend off this heat clearly wouldn't have worked. I tried to contact my family to say I couldn't get back yet, but my phone kept restarting over and over, unable to find any signal. George's phone was the same. I was frantic, the wounds previously affected by radioactive rainwater starting to itch uncontrollably, but no matter how anxious I was, I couldn't just sprout wings and fly back, I had to stay put. George helped apply medicine to the wounds on my palms. When I thanked him, I was startled by the hoarseness of my own voice. Just rest for now, I'll let you know as soon as there's a signal. You can probably guess this heat won't just last a day, injury only makes your ordeal more difficult, I sighed as the two of us sat in the living room, which was strewn with ice cubes, enjoying the air conditioning until sunset. The temperature still hadn't dropped, it felt as if the sun was unusually close to the earth, making no distinction between day and night in terms of heat. It was unbearably hot. We moved the sofa into the kitchen, set up several large basins of water to freeze in the lower shelf, sealed the kitchen door, opened the upper door of the refrigerator, and plugged in a fan to rest. It was still hot, but exhaustion weighed heavily on my eyelids, and when I woke up again, the sun was slowly emerging from behind the clouds. Awake, George handed me a bottle of water. You feel it too, don't you? I asked him, taking a sip of water. Yes, today's temperature has dropped a bit. But there's some bad news. Are you ready to hear it? What is it? In the early hours, the power went out, and when we woke up, the water was also out, and we still don't have any signal. I resisted taking another sip of water, scratched my itchy wound, and grabbed George, about to rush downstairs to retrieve the suitcase from the car. I've already brought it up for you. I breathed a sigh of relief, thanked him, glanced at the dwindling battery on my phone, turned it off, threw it into the bedroom, and couldn't help scratching the itchy wound again. Maybe it was the excessive heat, but the itch was unbearable. As I sent George out the door, I suddenly felt dizzy and lost consciousness, everything before my eyes turning white. When I woke up again, it was dark outside, the light filtering through the curtains. I lay on the sofa, which had been moved back to the living room, and although it seemed I had slept all day, I was still overwhelmed with fatigue. Bella. The redness in George's eyes startled me. He gently squeezed my hand, his expression serious. During the heavy rain earlier, did you come into contact with the blood of those fish without wearing protective gear? Did you also fail to wash properly and take medication afterward? I remembered the day Jim left and felt a pang of unease. Is it residual nuclear radiation on my skin? The worry in his eyes was unmistakable. The areas of your wound where the skin has been exposed need to be cut away, or it will get worse. I carefully thought about the areas that had come into contact with blood. My arms were the most affected, with a patch on each of my legs. It's just like getting a new skin, I told myself, yet, I couldn't control a slight shiver. George gently squeezed my hand again. I blinked, pulled away from his grasp, and moved to the corner. His gaze lingered on me for a long time. I hugged my knees and sat lost in thought for a while. Tomorrow, I'll go to the hospital to get it treated, he said. Okay, I'll come with you. But in the end, I never went to the hospital, because from sunrise the next day, the temperature began to soar again. By 6 in the morning, the thermometer already read 33 degrees, no electricity, no water. George and I took turns inventorying all the remaining supplies at home. Found 3 power banks with little charge left, and estimated they could barely run a fan for 4 hours. We agreed not to open the fridge unless absolutely necessary, to preserve whatever cool air was left as a lifeline. By noon, I was so hot I was barely lucid, the itchy areas feeling as though something was about to emerge. George poured me some ice water and pressed it against my flushed cheeks. I managed to regain some semblance of sanity, sitting in the shadowy corner by the wall, watching the shadow of the sun. Do you remember a book called To Live? I do. When I first read it, I thought it was just a novel. Living, how hard could it be? But today, I feel. I licked my dry lips and shrugged. George laughed a few times upon hearing my words, wiped the sweat-soaked hair off his forehead with a raised hand, and continued along the lines of my remark. Maybe there will be a new book someday. What would it be called? Dead? I wanted to laugh, but I didn't have the energy to even curl my lips, collapsing to the ground as I stared at the cracked ceiling. At 2:30 p.m., the temperature reached 65 degrees Celsius, hot enough to cook an egg on the palm of your hand. The fan blew over a block of ice, but even chugging water didn't bring any relief from the heat. In my dazed state, I thought about how, from torrential rains to scorching heat, the earth seemed to be desperately cleansing itself like it was sweeping away trash. Yet we still wanted to survive. Bella, you got a call. George moved me under the air conditioner. A warm breeze blew from the AC, barely mitigating the oppressive heat. I blinked a few times, turned to look at George, sweating profusely, and propped myself up to sit. I grabbed a drink from beside me and tossed it to him. There wasn't much water left, but I suddenly craved the taste of it. something I hadn't felt in a long time. Want a sip? Who knows how long it'll be until we can drink together again. George took it, we raised our bottles, clinked them mid-air, and then he gulped down several mouthfuls. Tell me, he sighed deeply, his hand holding the drink resting on his knee, his dark, shiny eyes meeting mine. I beckoned him with a gesture, pulling him to sit next to me. George, will the temperature rise tomorrow, or will it drop like yesterday? He didn't respond immediately, his brow furrowed tightly. The only sound the sizzle of evaporating moisture. After a long moment, his throat moved. It'll drop, Bella, tomorrow will be a day without rain or high temperatures. I smiled. When we were kids, you always knew I was lying because I'd give myself away. I handed him the knife. George looked down at me, his expression unreadable but oppressive under the light. I suppressed the urge to vomit, spread out on the ground, rolling up my trousers, no anesthesia. I took a sip of alcohol and watched him sterilize the knife with a lighter, his hand gripping the knife unsteadily trembling. His eyes were slightly red, and after a few seconds, his hot palm covered my eyes. In the darkness, I acutely felt the knife slice through my skin. It really hurt, but more than the pain, I feared the nuclear radiation seeping into my body, watching my flesh dissolve while I was still conscious. Until only my heartbeat remained, the temperature kept rising. The power went out again, the scorching air repeatedly burned my wound, and I dared not think how high the temperature would reach tomorrow. Is the earth really cleansing itself? How long will this apocalyptic scene last, or will it never end? Every choice in life is a significant gamble. When I felt like I was waking up to a mouthful of fire, the smell of blood was all around me, and pain replaced the burning in my nerves. George's tense nerves relaxed, and he collapsed beside me, slightly shifting to block some of the sunlight from me. We've got a signal. He managed to get the phone working, and after my parents asked anxiously for a long time, I gritted through the pain to respond to them, relieved to know that all four of them had made it to a mountain refuge. George wiped the tears from the corners of my eyes, set up the ice water around us, and after making me drink a whole bottle, he lay down next to me on the ground. No amount of ice can withstand such high temperatures. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, when the temperature peaked, the electricity suddenly cut off. It felt as though even the blood in my veins might evaporate. I always tell myself it's not hot, I said. After saying it so much, I feel like I've evolved. Do you think we hypnotize ourselves into evolving, or do we just die from the heat first? George suddenly sat up and pinched my cheek. Bella, I think it's also possible that we'll end up together. I cursed him with a smile. You're saying this in mine and Jim's house. Be careful or you might just anger us both enough to jump up and beat you. He laughed along, clearly teasing me on purpose. After all these years as childhood friends, even though it's been a while since we last met, some damn understanding still exists between us. George lay back down, his arm resting next to mine, maintaining a small gap. We endured 3 days, and the temperature seemed to know no bounds. By the 4th day, the outdoor temperature reached 73 degrees Celsius. Some of my wounds have festered and become worrisome, while others have already scabbed over and are healing. When the wind brushed against my skin through the overheated glass, a sudden chill pricked me, causing goosebumps all over my body. George quickly turned his head to lock eyes with me. Through his trembling pupils, I could see my own face flushed red. Holding my neck tightly with both hands, my nose flaring rapidly, and my tongue sticking out, I became acutely aware that I was unable to breathe in any oxygen. The extreme heat accelerated the thinning of the protective ozone layer, significantly increasing the rate at which oxygen was breaking apart. Our faces turned beet red, our consciousness began to blur, and the rhythm of our heartbeats started to become erratic. Through my blurry vision, I saw George forcefully smash the glass. He pushed me towards the window, and we desperately gasped for the scant oxygen, competing with the hot air outside. In those brief 5 minutes, it felt like a year had passed. Our facial hairs seemed to catch fire from the sweat, and when we could finally breathe normally again, we all collapsed weakly onto the floor. Suddenly, I felt on the verge of breaking down. I could accept seeing mutated fish in the rain of nuclear wastewater. I could accept almost being killed by floods. And I could even accept being dried up by the extreme heat, but now it was the oxygen, the very oxygen essential for our survival. If even the oxygen could disappear from the earth, then how on earth were we supposed to continue living, or more precisely, could we even survive? I didn't know. I looked up at the broken window, my eyelashes fluttered, and I felt a strong urge to throw myself out of it. But George firmly held on to me, wrapping his arms around me. Bella, don't be afraid, we can survive. We will make it, we can, but we both knew that it was nearly an impossible thing to achieve, yet in such circumstances, all we could do was to keep telling ourselves that and then desperately seek out that slim possibility. The temperature rose even higher. I pulled him back into the kitchen, opened the window to let the air circulate, then I cracked open the refrigerator. Piling up crushed ice and frozen food around us, just as I was about to sit inside, I suddenly remembered something, dashed out of the kitchen, and grabbed the 2 oxygen tanks from the suitcase. Then I hurried back into the kitchen. As things before me started to blur again, I pressed on my chest, trying to suppress the instinctual bodily reactions, and hastened into the refrigerator. Fortunately, it was a double-door model. I squeezed myself into one side, leaving more space for George. This was probably the first time George hated his own height so much. I shifted a bit to make room for him to fully fit in. After pulling the door closed while leaving a small gap, I handed him the oxygen tank. It was uncertain whether the lack of oxygen would last longer or reach a limit and stop. All we knew was that we had a 40-liter tank of oxygen in our hands. "Can we survive?" I whispered with a tiny voice. George's eyelashes trembled slightly as he answered, "We will." I don't know how much time had passed when I was awakened by the stench of decay from the wounds on my body. I still had half the oxygen left. I turned my head and nudged George, who was curled up in front of me. He didn't move. Panic set in, and with trembling fingers, I felt his wrist to make sure he was still alive, which slightly calmed me down. Rubbing my arms, which were covered in goosebumps from the cold, I gently pushed open the fridge door and tentatively stuck out a finger. There was no smell of burning. After a moment's thought, I boldly pushed the fridge door open completely and peeked out from the corner. It was 5:00 p.m., and the sun had hidden behind the clouds. A gentle breeze caressed my face, carrying the scent of oxygen. It was as if the scorching sun and oxygen deprivation had never existed, yet, the consecutive days of disasters reminded me to remain vigilant. I patted George a few more times, perhaps a bit too hard. As he slowly opened his eyes with a flinch of his nose, and upon seeing me standing whole outside, his body relaxed and he slid down from the fridge. The oxygen tank in his hand rolled toward me. I picked it up and shook it. "Only about a quarter left. We survived," George said with a rare goofy smile as he sat on the ground. I gave him a light hug and sat down beside him, only then noticing the ground was covered in red. Some of it was from sunburns on his back, and some from wounds on my own body. We laughed a bit, neither of us going for the medicine because we simply had no energy left. Leaning against the fridge, watching the clouds moved by the wind, we enjoyed the breeze in peace. "Do you think it'll be oxygen shortage next, or more scorching sun?" I asked. "Don't know," he replied. I paused, then added, "Right now, every second we live feels like earning millions. It's so worth it." We laughed, coughing with each chest shake. The moon climbed up the horizon. Its clear light fell to the ground and was soon obscured by gathering clouds. Suddenly, the floor began to shake violently. This is really an earthquake, although not caused by drought. The extreme temperatures had clearly triggered it. George propped himself up, dragging me hurriedly into the bathroom where some of my leftover supplies still remained. The building began to tremble up and down. After the last flood, it had only been superficially reinforced. Fundamentally, it was still very unsafe. "Shall we run?" George clearly remembered this too. I nodded, and we ran to the living room, surveyed the mess made by falling debris, grabbed the suitcase, and started rushing downstairs. Halfway down, something hit my face with the wind. In just seconds, a torrential downpour began, leaving no time to react. I heard a thunderous noise, so did George. The earthquake continued, and a flood followed closely. I sniffed, the familiar tightness in my chest spreading throughout my body. Here we go again. Oxygen shortage, earthquake, flood, and now oxygen shortage. What is true desperation? This is it. I dared not think further, trying hard not to succumb to negative emotions, following George while inhaling oxygen as we ran upward. Our oxygen was depleting fast. Struggling, we reached the rooftop. The suitcase wheels were gone, my oxygen nearly depleted, and George had none left. The building was nearly collapsing. Without a moment to spare, after a glance at each other, we opened the suitcase, threw it down, and jumped into the water. George landed on the suitcase, while I, a step too late, missed it by an arm's length, drowning. The rain stung my skin. Reach out, George screamed at me. With the last bit of sense, I shakily brought the oxygen to my nose, took a deep breath, and moved forcefully forward in the water. The moment I was about to grab it, a slimy sensation gripped my ankle. I remembered the giant octopus with 32 legs, back then. I could still grab a fire axe and strike it. Now, I could only be dragged deeper into the abyss, but I still wanted to live. I didn't want to let down Jim, who had died, wanted to live to see my parents, to see the world unspoiled by nuclear wastewater once more. In a daze, I heard something tear through the air and hit behind me. Many warm hands pulled at my body, oxygen returned to my nostrils. Through my blurred vision, I saw heroes moving against the tide. Still standing tall and proud even in the heavy rain. Survive. Only by surviving can we hope to see a brighter tomorrow. That's all the story. What do you think of this story? Share with me in the comments section. What would you do if you were in this situation? Looking forward to hearing from you. If you liked this story, don't forget to like it, share it, and subscribe to my channel. See you next time.